What if I told you that one of the most respected bands in rock history almost gave up on their new drummer before things even began? Yes, we're talking about Rush, a band built on precision, legacy, and one of the greatest drummers the world has ever seen, Neil Peart. So when news broke that a new drummer, Anika Nilles, had stepped into that space, fans were already on edge. Because let's be honest, you don't just replace Neil Peart. You don't just sit behind that drum kit and expect everything to feel the same. And that's where the problem began. Behind closed doors, during the very first rehearsals with Geddy and Lifeson, something wasn't right. The chemistry, off. The timing, not clicking. The feeling, missing something. In fact, it got so uncomfortable that doubts started creeping in almost immediately. Imagine walking into a room knowing you're stepping into the shoes of a legend, and within days, the very people who invited you are quietly asking themselves, "Did we make a mistake?" That's exactly what happened. Reports suggest that after just a few sessions, there were real conversations, serious ones, about whether this lineup would even work at all. Not weeks, not months, just days. Let that sink in. A drummer of Anika Nilles' caliber, someone respected globally for her skill and creativity, suddenly facing the possibility of being replaced before she even had a chance to settle in. And the reason? It wasn't about talent. It was something deeper, something harder to fix. Connection. Because with a band like Rush, it's not just about playing the right notes, it's about feeling them the same way. And at that moment, they didn't. But here's where it gets even more intense, because just when it looked like everything was about to fall apart, something happened that completely changed the direction of the story. Something no one expected. And it didn't just save her spot, it forced them to rethink everything. At this point, things could have gone either way. Behind the scenes, the pressure was building. For Anika Nilles, this wasn't just another gig. This was stepping into the shadow of Neil Peart, a man whose drumming wasn't just technical, it was almost spiritual to fans of Rush. And that kind of pressure? It can either break you or transform you. But here's what most people don't realize. It wasn't just her feeling the tension. Even Geddy and Lifeson were struggling in their own way. Because for decades, they had built something almost telepathic with Neil Peart. They didn't need to explain things, they just knew. Now, suddenly, they were in a room trying to recreate that magic with someone new. And it wasn't clicking. Not yet. Every beat felt slightly unfamiliar. Every transition needed more effort. Every moment reminded them of what they had lost. And that's where the real questions started to grow. Was the problem Anika, or was it the impossible standard she was being measured against? Because let's be honest, no one wins when you're constantly being compared to a legend. Still, the doubts didn't disappear overnight. There were quiet pauses during rehearsals, moments where the energy dropped, times when they had to stop and start again. And in those moments, you could almost feel it. Uncertainty. But then, something shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just a small change at first, a groove that felt tighter, a rhythm that felt more natural, a moment where for the first time, it didn't feel forced, it felt right. And those small moments, they started to add up, because Anika wasn't trying to be Neil Peart, she was doing something different. She was bringing her own identity into the music, her own style, her own energy, her own interpretation of what Rush could sound like now. And slowly, very slowly, that began to break through the tension. But here's the twist no one talks about. Even as things started improving, the doubts didn't completely disappear, because improvement isn't the same as certainty. And in a band like Rush, almost working is never enough. So the real question became, was this just a temporary adjustment, or was this truly the beginning of something new? And more importantly, were they finally starting to believe in her, or were they just trying to convince themselves? But while all of this was happening behind closed doors, outside, a completely different storm was already building. The moment fans heard that Anika Nilles was stepping in with Rush, the reactions were instant. and divided. Some were excited. They saw her talent, her creativity, her unique style, and believed she could bring something fresh to the band. But others? They weren't having it. Because to them, Neil Peart wasn't just a drummer. He was Rush, and replacing him, or even trying to, felt almost disrespectful. Comments started flooding in. "She's good, but she's not Neil. This doesn't feel like Rush anymore. Why are they even trying to continue?" And just like that, the pressure doubled. Now it wasn't just about proving herself in rehearsal rooms, it was about proving herself to millions of fans worldwide. And that's where things got even more complicated. Because every performance, every rehearsal leak, every small detail was now being watched, analyzed, and judged. One wrong move, it becomes a headline. One imperfect moment, it becomes proof for critics. And suddenly, the conversation shifted from "can she play" to "should she even be there?" And this is where the real controversy begins. Because some fans started asking a question that no one in the band wanted to answer publicly. Is this still Rush, or just a version of it trying to survive? And when that question enters the conversation, everything changes. Because now it's no longer just about music, it's about legacy. And legacy is dangerous. It can inspire greatness or destroy expectations. Meanwhile, inside the band, the pressure from fans wasn't going unnoticed. Every doubt online, every comparison, every criticism, it all added weight to a situation that was already fragile. And even though things had improved between them, there was still one question hanging in the air. What happens when they step onto a bigger stage? Because rehearsals are one thing, but facing the world? That's a completely different test, and not everyone survives it. So now the stakes are higher than ever. The fans are watching, the expectations are brutal, and the margin for error, almost zero. Which leads to the biggest question of all. If things go wrong in front of the world, will Rush stand by her, or will they make the decision they almost made before and walk away? So now, everything comes down to this moment. After the doubts, the pressure, the comparisons, and the quiet conversations that almost changed everything, where does Anika Nilles really stand with Rush today? Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. She was never the problem. The real challenge was something much bigger: letting go. Because for Geddy Lee and Lifeson, this was never just about finding a new drummer. It was about moving forward without Neil Peart. And that's not something you fix in a few rehearsals. That's something that takes time, acceptance, and a complete shift in mindset. And maybe, just maybe, that's why things felt off in the beginning. Because they weren't just testing her, they were testing whether Rush itself could still exist in a new form. And that's a question with no easy answer. But here's what changed everything. Anika didn't try to replace Neil Peart. She didn't copy him, she didn't imitate him. She respected him while still being herself. And that's what slowly earned their trust. Not perfection, not imitation, but authenticity. So is she about to be replaced? Right now, no. But is her position completely secure? That's where things get complicated, because in a band like Rush, nothing is guaranteed. Every performance still matters, every moment still counts, and the expectations, they will never go away. But maybe that's not a bad thing, because pressure doesn't just expose weakness, it reveals strength. And so far, she's still standing, still playing, still proving one moment at a time that she belongs in that room. And maybe the real story here isn't about whether she'll last, but whether fans are ready to accept a version of Rush that dares to evolve. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about replacing a legend, it's about deciding what comes next. Some stories are told by those who lived them, but some truths are only revealed when you look deeper. And this one, it's far from over. Because the next performance, the next reaction, the next moment on stage could change everything. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because I'll always bring you the stories others won't tell.